This is TJ with TechMadeEZ. Welcome to my channel. My channel is all about making things affordable, practical, and easy. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about 5 different options for a home server. These options come in many different ranges, from a mini PC to a full tower, and what the advantage and disadvantage of each one are, from this mini PC to the small form factors to the towers. And depending on what your needs are may depend on which one you use. Me particularly, I have a file server. All it does is just a file server only, and then I have an app server. But you can also use several of these to be a file server and an app server at the same time. Maybe run Proxmox, Unraid, TrueNAS, so on and so forth. But let's go through these and see what the advantage and disadvantage are, the options, what kind of the pricing, so on and so forth. Let's get started. Okay, before we go into these in detail, I just want to go over the models here, because sometimes I don't mention the maker model as I'm reviewing these. And you can get all these on eBay. They start at $40, like this HP Mini, the 800 3G starts at $40, and so on and so forth, up to $100 depending on which one you get. So basically we're going to be talking about this HP Mini 800 3G. We're going to be talking about small form factors. This particular one is in a Dell Optiplex 3010, and then we're going to be talking about the HPZ 230. Again, this is a small form factor. It's a little bit bigger, small form factor, kind of a medium small form factor, and the advantage of using one of these. And then we're going to talk about this Dell 550. Now again, you don't have to stick with these models. These are just different sizes, and these models have changed as they've gotten newer. But this 550, this is a mid tower. It's not a full tower. So what the advantage are, maybe having a server that's a mid tower, and then a full-on server workstation, which is on the left here, this HP Z420. Now this HP Z420 makes a great file Proxmox app server. Also the Z440. I'm going to be having a video coming up where we're going to be showing how to make a server out of this HP Z440 with either 4 or 5 or 7 hard drives, so you can use a file server and an app server. Great for Proxmox, Unraid, TrueNAS, so on and so forth. Okay, before we look at these in detail, I just want to let you know that you don't have to stick with these brands or models. I'm just saying that between Lenovo, Dell, and HP, there's lots of options there to make certain models a server. Take for instance the Z420. The Dell has its own version of this. It's on the X79 platform, but also the Z440, Dell has their own version of that, and maybe you want to go with the Dell and not an HP. Same thing with the mini PC up there. You got Lenovo, Dell, and mini PCs as well. I'm just showing you these as options that are available for you to have a home server, whether it's an app server, file server, or app and file server. So let's get started. Okay, so let's take these mini PCs for a minute here. So you can start getting these at $50. And me personally, I don't understand the fascination with Raspberry Pis when you can get these for $50, and the processor in there is more powerful than a Raspberry Pi. Don't get me wrong, I know a lot of people love Raspberry Pis, but me, I would just get one of these, call it good. And a lot of times, depending on the vendor, the used unit will depend on how big of NVMe drive in it, SSD drive in it, how much RAM is in it, and that controls the price as well. But a lot of these start at $40. Now, if, like, let's say you get into one that maybe has 6 core, 6 threads, that's going to be probably more like $80, so on and so forth. And I actually have a video where I tested using this with Plex and JellyFin, and I'll leave that link down below. But obviously you can use these for more than that. You know, maybe you just want a standalone little PC to maybe create your own router, pfSense, or maybe you run Nginx, so on and so on. In fact, I was trying to decide whether I was going to do Nginx on just one of these, but instead I just decided to put it on my app server. So there's just lots of options here. Also too, they make little great desktops. This one right here, my daughter, I'm going to go ahead and put Linux on that, and she's going to use it for a desktop for school. Most of the schoolwork she does is on the web, so she doesn't really need any Windows apps. And she doesn't really use that many Windows apps anyway, since all of her stuff is done on the web, and she's not a big gamer, so this works great for her as just a PC. Obviously it's going to run Linux desktop great, but we're talking about servers here, so again, this will make a great app server. And again, depending on the model, so on and so forth, will depend on the price. Now this one has a Type C, and that's why I bought this one here, because it had a Type C. Also too, this one can take 2 NVMe's in it as well. And so, but the older model only took one. So you kind of have to look around at the models to see which one is going to meet your criteria. I like the fact that I could put two NVMe's in there. I could use one for the data and operating system, maybe one for backup, so on and so forth. But anyway, there's lots of options what you could do here. If you're talking Docker or Proxmox, there's a lot of apps that you can run on a 4-core processor. In fact, the processors that come with these, all of these systems here, most of them are just as powerful as the N100 or N150 that they're putting in mini micro stuff today. And more powerful, just depends on what year you buy. So the price on all of these products that I'm going to go through depends on how new they are, how older they are. Obviously, the newer they are, the more powerful they're going to be, the more expensive they're going to get. So because these mini PCs come in many different forms from many different manufacturers, when it comes to the used ones, I stick with Dell and HP. I'm not a Lenovo person, but you can find these different flavors in Dell and HP. You don't have to stick with HP or Dell. There's advantages, of each one over the other. Okay, really quick, I'm just going to jump in here and talk a little bit more about this mini PC. This mini PC, there's two versions. The one version that starts at around $40, it's the 803G. Now the 803G is limited to the i5 6500 and 7500. Those are 4 cores, 4 threads. But the 804G, you can get an 8500T, which is 6 cores, 6 threads. Now that's going to cost you more, around $80 for that. Now I also want to mention on all of these systems that I'm going to go over, because I forgot to mention this earlier, they all have at least 2 USB ports in the front and at least 4 in the back or more. And it's a mix of between USB 2, USB 3. Some of these are USB 3.1 and USB 3.2s. You'd have to look at those. And then obviously this one has that Type-C there, and that's why I wanted these models here, because I did want a Type-C on these mini PCs. Okay, when it comes to small form factor PCs, there's 2 different sizes, and actually with some of the newer stuff that comes out today, you can see really there's 3. And some of the newer small form factor PCs that are out today, and mini PCs, you're talking they have major processors in them, but the cost of them, you're looking at $500 to $1,000, depending on how they're configured. But let me just tell you more about this small form factor PC. Now, one of the advantages of going with a small form factor PC over a mini PC, at least you have some PCI slots to work with. And in this particular case, now this one here, it normally comes with a DVD. I took it out, and I don't know what I did with it, so I didn't put it back in for this demo, but one of the advantages of these is obviously the PCI slots. So this particular model has 2 full 16 PCI slots. Now this is a whole thing. As these get newer, this one of these PCI slots goes away, and it's maybe a Type 2 PCI slot. And so, but the reason why I like these is because you do have an option here. A lot of people will buy these for gaming, and they'll put in a single slot. Again, they're not going to get high resolution with those, but there are some cards now that are small form factor that will give you high resolution. So, but the thing that you have to keep in mind when buying these small form factors, whether it's this one or the mid small form factor, is the newer they get, for whatever reason, don't ask me why they did this, but the PCI slot for the video card is right next to the power supply. So I'm using one of these as my app server. Now it's a newer one than this. Again, these start at $50, depending on the processor that is being sold with it, and the vendor, and the RAM, and whether it comes with a drive or not, so on and so forth. Sometimes they're bare bone. I don't usually buy these bare bone. I usually like to buy them with the processor. I don't care about the RAM, but I usually like to have the processor in them. And there's only so many options when it comes to the processors of these older ones, but you can find these with i7s, and the i7s are mostly going to be 4 cores, 8 threads. Again, you can get i5s, so it's 6 cores, 6 threads. The one that I bought was a Dell 5000, and it's 20 cores. I can't remember how many threads it is. So that was a little more spendy. I paid about $350 for that. And there's a reason why I went more expensive on my app server because it was going to run Plex and JellyFin, and I was going to use Handbrake to do my compression. I was going to load it off onto this small form factor PC. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten such an expensive form factor PC. If I was just running Docker apps or I was running Proxmox, depending on the apps that I'm running, I was overkill for what I bought. You can get one of these with the 10 core, 20 threads for 170 bucks. So on and so forth. But just be aware, whenever you're buying these, be aware of what your needs are. PCI, do you need PCI slots? Do you want to put in a gaming card in here? And a lot of your small form factor gaming cards are 2 slots. And you have to really look inside to see where they've located the PCI slot, because a lot of them, again, like on my Dell 5000, my PCI slot for my card is right next to here. Now, I don't need it because I do have Intel Sync on there for processing 4K, but I might still buy one and put one in, so it'll be the single slot card that I'll put in there. And again, RAM is limited on these as well. This particular one does have 4 slots. Some of them only have 2, so you kind of have to look at that. So now, one of the things I am going to be doing coming up, actually, I'll talk about that with the next small form factor that I'm going to go over here. So really quick, I just want to talk about these PCI slots again and why it's important for me. I always want something with extra PCI slots because I run 10 gig networking in my house, and this way I can put it a low profile 10 gig networking card in here. But also too, like I mentioned, if you're doing video transcoding or anything like that and your CPU doesn't support that, then now you have an extra slot for a video card. Let's say the Intel Arc A310, you can get those for $100 or less, throw in there, and now you got transcoding. So you may have different needs for PCI slots, whatever they are. Now, one thing I want to mention really quick too, obviously storage is limited on this particular small form factor PC. So mostly I would use this for a data server or an app server, unless you're going to hook up some external storage to it. That's one of the limitations of these really small form factor. It's even a bigger limitation than the mini PC, because the mini PC that I've shown you, the 804G, you can have 3 drives in there, 2 NVMe's and 1 SSD. And then also too, I just want to mention again, the reason why I spent so much money on my particular app server, my Dell, is just because of Handbrake only. If I wasn't doing Handbrake on there, I would have been fine maybe getting one with the i7 10700. Again, like I said, you can get those between $150 and $180. So if you want a lot more processing power than say 4 or 6 cores, you have those options. You don't have to stay with these models that I'm showing. I'm just showing you the sizes, the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so this particular small form factor is one of my favorite ones because you can put 3 hard drives in this one. And so let's just go ahead and take a look in here. And so I actually do have 3 hard drives in here. I was using this for testing. I'm not using this for production. But if you're on a budget, again, you can pick these up starting at $50. And depending on what your needs are, most of them are going to come with an i3, i5 in them, 4 cores, 4 threads. You can find them with i7s with 4 cores, 8 threads. You can again the same thing. You can find them with an i5 that's 6 cores, 6 threads. So it just depends on what your needs are. Now this particular one, it comes in 2 flavors. It comes with Xeon, or it comes with just a regular Intel i5, i3, i7. I personally wouldn't get the Xeon. Now I'm a Xeon person. My desktop's a Xeon, my servers are Xeons, but this particular one I wouldn't do a Xeon because the Xeons don't have built-in video. And if you want to take advantage of all these PCI slots in here, then one of these is going to be taken up by a video card if you buy the Xeon version. So I would stick with the regular Intel version on these, just because it leaves your slots open. Now this particular one, I'm going to be creating an NVMe server out of this one, and it's going to hold 12 NVMe drives. Subscribe and like. That video is coming up probably about another month because I'm waiting for the parts to come in. And so, but the other thing that you can do with one of these as well is, because it does have 1 hard drive bay that you can use, I do have one of these SSD drive bays that's an 8 one, and I do have that in another one of these. Now this particular model does support 5 hard drives. It does have 5 SATA ports on it. So there is plenty of room for hard drives or SSDs on there. But again, the reason why I like this model as well is because it's got more room for drives. It's got more room for PCI slots. Let's say you want to put in a 10 gig card, you can put a 10 gig card in here, so on and so forth. So again, I'm just excited about this one because I am going to turn this into an NVMe server. And by the way, on the cheap side, because the NVMe servers can become expensive. When I say cheap, I'm talking the parts. Unfortunately, the NVMe drives, depending on what size you get, that's going to be the expensive part of any NVMe server. So that's the advantage of this one, is I just like the fact that it has multiple PCI slots, because I usually try to run 10 gigabit cards as well. So it allows me to do that and have some card options. All right, the next PC, this is a mini tower. Just so you know, the one that I just showed you that has 3 hard drives, you have to really look at models, because the newer models don't support the 3 hard drives. And that same HP changed the way they do organize that case that I just showed you, and there is no 5.5 inch there in the front. There is no 5.5 inch drive bay that you can use. There is a 5.5 inch drive inside, but there's no bay that you can use on the outside. So you can't, if you wanted to do something like this and put one of those in there, you can't do that. So again, you have to look at the models, what year they are, if it meets your needs, if you need 3 hard drives, so on and so forth. So now these mini towers, see, that's the whole thing. This mini tower, it does not have an open drive bay that you can throw something in, which is kind of sad because it would have left some options open. But the reason why someone might be consider this is because you can put in you can't put in a full size, full length, a really long card in here, and you're going to be limited by the power supply, but you can run certain cards in here. And that's really kind of the advantage here. You don't have any more hard drive space as far as for storage goes. Okay, really quick, I just want to mention there is a 2 bay drive bay here for 2 SSDs. So you could put 2 SSDs in here and a hard drive. So you do have room for drive space in here. It's just that your 2 SSDs are going to cost you way more money than a regular hard drive, especially if you're looking at 4 terabytes. You're looking at $200 each. Where if you're talking a 4 terabyte server hard drive, you might be looking at $25 each. So that's why I like the other one a little bit better than this one here. But again, it depends on your needs. Maybe you want a full-size card. When I say full-size card, it can't be super long. I mean, this card here is a RTX 2060. And again, you're going to be limited by the power supply as well for any gaming cards you put in here that you may be running on your server. Actually, the other HP that I just showed you is a better option for hard drive storage than this one is. But this one does give you a little bit more room. I'm not sold on these mini towers. I mean, if you want a smaller footprint, maybe you're going to do a gaming console, and you don't want to have to worry and pay the price for, because you know, on these small form factor PCs, depending on the card that you get, and there's a limited amount of cards that you can get for gaming on those anyway. You know, you're looking at starting at $100 for a single slot card, and then on up to $300 or $400 on a double card like an NVIDIA 3050, so on and so forth. So, but this one here at least will accommodate a full-size card up to a certain length. So it gives you some more options there if you wanted to turn something like this into a gaming rig. I personally don't know if I'd use this as a file server. Maybe if you want, you know. But again, it doesn't support a lot of storage. Now I will talk about options as far as storage goes. Even though we have this mini PC here, you can hook up 4, 6, or 8 bay external hard drive if you want storage, and that is an option for some of these. For all of these is external storage. But me personally, I don't know if I would. I know a lot of people do like to use these mini towers. I personally would I'd rather have a full tower if I'm going to go with something like this. Again, it depends on your need, how small you want your footprint to be, so on and so forth. And again, as far as processor wise goes, these also start at $50, but they can go up depending on how new they are, what processor you get on them, and so on and so forth. Now, the thing that I'm going to say this much, buffercation. If you don't know what buffercation is that's where a motherboard, when it says it supports buffercation, that means you can go into the BIOS and say you've got a PCI 16 slot. You can split that. You can split that slot up to 4x4, 4x4, or 8x8, so on and so forth. So depending on the PCI card that you buy, especially if you buy a 4-slot NVMe card that goes in to a 16-slot PCI slot, it will need the motherboard to have buffercation in order to have access to all 4 of them, unless you buy a card that has buffercation built into it. So none of these that I've showed you supports buffercation. The next one I'm going to show you does support that. So let's go ahead and look at a full tower and the advantage of a full tower. All of these that I've showed you so far, basically, with the exception of the HP that supports 3 hard drives, basically I would use those as app servers or a Proxmox server. This next tower I'm going to show you, you could use as a Proxmox file server, app server, whatever you want to use. But again, it's bigger, it's going to take more power, so on and so forth. But your options on this here, and I've got a video on how to turn this HP into a server. But what I want to show with this is that one of the things that I like about this, and this is the HP Z440, or 420, excuse me. It had 3 open bays here, so I could put this 5-bay hard drive in it, or enclosure in here. Plus, it holds 3 more drives. Let's tip this open. So here's where the 5-bay drive is now, and then it holds 3 drives here, and so on and so forth. And so in order to set this up this way, I do have to have a controller card. So this is an LSI controller card. This particular PC is very flexible when it comes to being a file server. And if I was to buy one of these, I would buy the version 2. They don't say version 2, so when you go on eBay, you just have to look for Z440 that has a version 2 chip in it. Because like I said, they did come out with 2 different models, but they don't distinguish which one's version 1 and which one's version 2 unless someone distinctly says that in their description. So, and the reason why version 2, the BIOS is organized better, so better BIOS, and on top of that, you have a lot more CPUs that you can choose from, up to, I believe this one supports up to, I want to say 14 cores, 28 threads. I think is the largest one you can get for this, but they're really inexpensive. You're talking 12 core CPU, 24 threads for like $9. And plus 2, it's DDR3, ECC RAM is cheap. I mean, you can get 64 gigs of RAM in here probably for $30. So all the parts for this, because it's older, are cheap. But just so you know, I'm surprised because I thought these would come down in price, and they have not come down in price. You can get them anywhere between $80 to $120, depending on who's selling them, how they come. Now, I usually will buy mine. I don't buy these particularly bare bone because they won't put in the description whether it's a V2 or V1 motherboard. So this particular one, if it has a V2 chip in it, I don't care how much RAM is in it, because I'm going to throw however much RAM I want in it. I'll just buy that, and then I'll put my own V2 chip in it. But it's very flexible, so it can support up to 8 drives. You can run Proxmox on this. My friend right now is running Proxmox on his, and it's very quiet, very quiet. Okay, so one of the advantages of using a full-size workstation server is you can put a full-size gaming card in here if you're going to use a gaming card in your server. And it's a 600 watt power supply. One thing you need to be aware of, if you're going to buy one of these, they do come configured with different power supplies. One's a 450 and one is a 600. I would definitely get the 600 if you're going to go this route. I'll show you one of these. Now, I will say this much. I'm going to have a video coming out where I'm going to use the newer model of this, which is the HP Z440. Unfortunately, it doesn't have room for a 5-bay internal drive holder bay, but I'm going to show you how to make it into a server, file server, great for Proxmox, running whatever you want, gaming, video pass-through, so on and so forth. But this one's a little older. You can still run Proxmox with this. Obviously, my file server is one of these, and I'm running TrueNAS on it. I just use it as a file server only because I have my app server that is separate. So these basically are the different models. So again, this is all going to depend on your needs, what you need as far as a server. Do you need storage, or do you just want to run Docker apps? And how much power do you really need to run those Docker apps? Most Docker apps and Proxmox apps, depending on what you're running, doesn't take a ton of processing power. In fact, my app server right now, I'm probably running, I don't know, 5 or 6 Docker apps. It's probably at 3% right now. Now that does go up when someone gets on there to run Plex or JellyFin, and I run those both together. There's a reason why. I'm not going into that now. So obviously the processing power will go up when they do that. But and again, I overkilled on that one just because I'm using Handbrake on there as well on my app server. So I just want to go ahead and show you my file server. So let's take a look at it real quick. Okay, so this is my HP Z420 file server that I just was showing you on the table. Now this particular one, instead of doing a 5-bay here, I did a 4-bay, and then I ran this one externally. And the reason why is I'm a man out of convenience, and if the hard drive goes out on it, I don't want to open up the case and try and figure out which one. This makes it easy for me to do. In fact, we can take a look. It's just Frankenstein, but the wires are just going here and going through the back. But again, the other Z420 that I showed you, that's why a test server, and it also supports up to 8 drives because I have the 5 drive bay here, the 3 drives in here. And then on top of here, you'll notice this here, that's a spare hard drive in case one of them goes bad. I usually buy used server hard drives, and so that I've had majorly good luck with used server hard drives. But you don't know how many hours they are. I don't like to buy them super old, so I always just have a spare here, and I am running RAID 6, so I have 2 drives that can go down without losing any data. And in this particular server, I built the server about a year ago. I did have a commercial file server in here before that was really loud. This one's a little loud because I turned the fans up on it, but I don't need the fans as high, especially because these have built-in fans on them. And so I could turn the fans down and it would be a little bit more quieter. It's not that it's that noisy, but you wouldn't want this at your desk the way I have the fans on it. And so, again, this is just an example. So let's go ahead and go to the desktop for a minute. Okay, so I just want to give you an overview of these different types of PCs that you can buy for a server. A server doesn't have to be a huge workstation server like we have on the left here with the Z420. It could be as small as your HP mini PC there, but you just have to understand what goals are you trying to accomplish? How many apps are you going to be running? What is it that you're going to be doing? Now, don't get me wrong, this HP Elite, a mini PC with the 8500, it did great running Plex and JellyFin. No issues there at all. And for me personally, if you could, it's going to cost a little bit more. It depends on what your needs are, but I would at least try to find an i5 8500 or an i7 4790 that gives you 4 cores and 8 threads. Just gives you a little bit more headroom to run a little bit more Docker apps. But a lot of Docker apps just don't take up a lot of processing power. And again, I went overkill on mine when I bought my Dell. I wasn't going to get the 5000 with the i7 12700, but because I was going to offload my Handbrake, that's why I bought that one. For me, if I wasn't running Handbrake, I probably would have got the Dell 5000 that came with the i7 10700 because it's 10 cores, 20 threads. Plenty for anything that I'd be running as far as Docker apps go. And I did dump Proxmox about 6 months ago and started running COS because all I run is apps. And so I'm using COS to run all my Docker apps. Anyway, this is TJ with TechMadeEZ. Hope that was helpful. Have a great day.
Now that was easy.